Hi, I wanted to basically go over my extensor tendon rupture repair. This was something that happened to me, and when I was looking for information online or videos about it, I found hardly any information. There is a disclaimer. I am not a medical advisor. I have absolutely no medical training. Do not take anything that I say to heart. This is simply a summary of my experience with this injury. So, for those of you who are not aware, a extensor tendon is one of the tendons that's on the top side of your hand. So, as you can kind of see, my veins and my tendons right here, they go into each of your fingers, and then there's actually and they're obviously connected to your muscles that go into your forearm. There is a large muscle that is connected to your three middle fingers, and that has a tendon that runs up to your index finger. And then there's also a smaller muscle that has a second tendon that runs up to your index finger. So, to summarize, there's two tendons that run to your index finger. Now, I wanted to go ahead and show you guys this. I am not currently wearing this device anymore. This was simply something that I had to wear post-surgery. I am now almost 12 weeks post-op. So I am healed. I have been cleared by the doctor to no longer have to wear this device. I attended physical therapy twice a week for almost 10 weeks post-op. And at this point, I'm no longer wearing anything, but I wanted to go ahead and explain to you how this contraption works, why I had to wear it. Obviously, it looks pretty ridiculous, and whenever I was first fitted for it, I was like, this has to be a joke. Like, there's no way this is real, because I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never seen anybody wear anything like this. But the way that this works is basically there are rubber bands connected to fishing wire, basically, and then there's these little Velcro type little pink patchies. I don't really know what to call them, to be honest with you. But once I was fitted for this device, I had to wear it during the day, and then I would have to do my exercises of moving my fingers to where the pink notches hit the base of this. So as you can see, my fingers are, resting position here. And then when I put force on them, the pink notches go to the white, shield. Obviously, it looks ridiculous, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of show you this and how that works. And so I had to do this basically 75 times a day. So every time I thought about it, I would do 5 to 10 reps. And then I had to do it throughout the entire day. This was my daytime cast, and my hand at the time while I wore this cast was in a compression sleeve. I'm no longer wearing that. That's basically just to help with swelling. Now, my other cast was my nighttime cast, which also looks pretty crazy, but basically goes underneath. And so during the night, I would take off this top cast and I would only wear the bottom cast underneath, which would basically just keep my wrist at a specific angle, which, as you can see, the top cast does as well. Both of them are fitted to keep my wrist at a 30-degree angle, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe that's what it was, because you don't want to put too much tension on the tendons that have been repaired. So that's basically how the cast works. Now I'm going to basically give you guys my story, my experience, how I ended up where I did, all of the above. After I removed this, sorry for that noise. Okay, so I basically had a really unusual situation. I was in the process of packing my home to move to a different city, and at the end of this day, I was showing my house to some potential buyers to sell the home. And so I left my house, and when I left, I went to go pop my wrist. Now, this is something that I've done a million times before. I constantly pop my joints, And I want to add a disclaimer that this is a very unusual situation. This is not common. I've had multiple doctors that have said that this should have never, ever happened. They believe that there's probably more going on, and that's all I'm going to leave that at. Now, generally, this type of injury might happen to somebody that is either much older, is an athlete, and uses your hands or wrist on a regular basis. I'm not an athlete. I run, and running is as much as I need to do. As far as like strength training, never been my thing. I don't lift weights. So, like I said, this is a very uncommon situation. As I went to go pop my wrist, which I was doing this motion, so up and down, as you can see, this is my unaffected wrist. My hand's completely fine. I was doing this motion and I did it very vigorously, and basically the two tendons that are connected to my index finger ruptured. So like a spontaneous rupture to that specific finger of those tendons. Now, what happened is, because it was so unusual, I went to the urgent care in my town the next day. They told me it was an infection. The day after that, I saw an orthopedic urgent care. They said that I sprained my wrist, and both of them were kind of dismissive of what was going on. Nobody really took me seriously, so I finally drove to another city with better health care and saw somebody that actually knew what he was talking about, and upon his assessment did determine that I had ruptured tendons. He wasn't completely sure where my tendons were ruptured within the structure of my hand. So initially when he did the assessment, which, let me also preface this, because I was misdiagnosed the first two doctors that I saw, I went a week and a half without doing anything about it, and my hand progressively got worse. It became very swollen, it became very inflamed, it became very sensitive, to the point that I could no longer fit a store-bought compression sleeve over it because it was so swollen. And it was like if anything even touched my elbow, just grazed it barely, I was in extreme pain. So I knew that there was definitely a problem and it was getting worse. So I waited, and then finally I spoke with a family member who is a doctor and encouraged me to see a very specific hand surgeon that has a fellowship in hand surgery. And so I did, and upon his review, he inspected that I probably had some ruptured tendons. He didn't know exactly where they were ruptured. And at this point, my hand was so swollen that I was unable to move my three middle fingers. I was unable to bend my wrist at all. It was not moving. And so basically what had happened was scar tissue was starting to build up from the point of injury. So anytime your body has any sort of blunt force trauma, and this can even happen to something as simple as like, a piercing, your body is going to react to it and basically try and heal it on its own. So scar tissue began to build in my hand from the moment that I incurred the injury, which was on the 3rd of the month that I had this injury occur. And I was not seen by this doctor until like the 15th or 16th, and then he wasn't able to actually perform surgery until like the 21st. So that's almost, the 3rd to the 21st. I mean, that's a full 2 weeks. So at that point, I was in quite a bit of pain. I wasn't able to move my wrist. I wasn't able to move my fingers. And I started doing research online, kind of like I mentioned before, and wasn't able to find hardly anything. And I was so discouraged because this injury had kind of happened freakishly, and I had had doctors misdiagnose me, and then I waited, multiple weeks before I finally got a real answer. And it was like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. And so I couldn't find really a lot of help online. So I ultimately had surgery through this surgeon who properly diagnosed me. And when he went in, he started, towards the middle of my hand, and he really thought that the tears were going to be in this portion of my hand based on the physical assessment that he had performed, which was extremely thorough. And then as he went in, there was so much scar tissue that it was preventing him from repairing anything. So he basically had to clean out the scar tissue in the entire top of my hand. And the way that they kind of described it to me is like a Laffy Taffy is similar to your tendons. And so like if you imagine, like you're trying to tear Laffy Taffy, it flattens as it stretches. And that's similar to like your tendons in the sense that there was so much scar tissue building on top of my hand that it basically flattened all of my tendons to the bone. And so he had to, pull the tendons off my bones, each individual tendon. He had to restructure them to basically reinforce them because they were stretched so thin that he was really concerned about their strength moving forward. And then he still was not able to find the tears, and so he basically had to keep going. And right here, some of you might know, is where you have that tunnel that they have the common condition of carpal tunnel, which is called your retinaculum. And all of your individual tendons that go into your fingers, they run through the carpal tunnel or the retinaculum into these little tubes. And so he ultimately had to cut my retinaculum open because he was not finding the tears in my tendons. And that was when he was able to find the tears in the 2 tendons that lead to my index finger. So like I stated before, there's a small muscle somewhere in your forearm, and then there's a really large muscle that goes all the way down here, all the way back up, and connects to your 3 middle fingers. And the 2 tendons, it's kind of complicated, and really the best way for you to understand it is to look at an image of the extensor tendons in the top of the hand. That was really the only way I could understand it when I was reading my surgery transcript. So he cut the retinaculum, he repaired the 2 tendons that, go to the index finger. And those tears were pretty close to where the muscles connect into your forearm. So it's, your muscle in your forearm turns into that tendon tissue that goes into your fingers. And so ultimately he was able to successfully repair. He did everything he could to remove all the scar tissue inside of the top of my hand that had been building over the 2 weeks of time that had gone without proper treatment. And he also reinforced the retinaculum whenever he sewed it back together after cutting through it so that it would be strong moving forward, and that him cutting through it wouldn't, damage or weaken it by any means. So that's a lot. Now, about a week and a half after surgery, I started physical therapy, and over the course of my therapy, it became obvious that there were some issues with some of the scar tissue. So, if you think about your body, it's producing this scar tissue continuously, and then you have surgery, they remove it, but your body is still in that mode of trying to heal the injury. Because at this point, I had, technically 2 injuries occur. So like the initial injury when the tendons ruptured, and then the second injury would be considered like your surgery where they repair it, and my body continued to produce scar tissue. And so my physical therapy, has been very successful in the fact that it has strengthened my fingers, my grip, but I've had a lot of issues with mobility as far as being able to lift my fingers because of the scar tissue that's built in the top of my hand. Now, all of that to say, I'm so thankful that I had a really smart, thorough surgeon who knew what he was doing and was able to actually properly assess me and then take care of the problem through surgery. So, I'm on the back end of this journey, hopefully. And if there's anything that I could tell you, it would be 1, like trust your gut, and then 2, make sure that you are advocating for yourself in the medical office space, because people aren't always going to stop and listen to you, and sometimes you have to, require them to listen to you. And so it took a lot of effort just to have this surgeon's office even be able to fit me in. And fortunately, they were able to do so. But Some of the things that I wish I would have known going into the procedure and the healing process is it takes time. It takes time, it takes time, it takes time. And I am young and I'm impatient and I'm a very active person. I do not ever have times where I'm just sitting doing nothing. I'm constantly working, I'm constantly doing things. And so for me, going through a process of not being able to use my hand was very frustrating. It was very discouraging. But at this point, almost 12 or 11 or 12 weeks post-op, I'm so thankful, that I've come this far, that I've been able to get through all my therapy, that I've been able to, have successful checkups. But one thing that I was really not expecting from surgery was the pain after surgery. I have had multiple surgeries in my lifetime, more than I probably should. And this was really the first time that I experienced nerve pain on this level. So you might have heard or seen, for a lot of like hand, arm, shoulder injuries or surgeries, they generally require or have you receive a nerve block in your upper shoulder. I did receive a nerve block, and when I got out of surgery, I couldn't feel my arm at all, which I had some people say, like, be prepared. It's going to make you very uncomfortable because you can't feel your arm. But like my arm has gone numb while I've been sleeping because I'm laying on top of it the wrong way before, and like you get over it. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's just like if your leg were to fall asleep and you don't feel it. Obviously it's uncomfortable, but it's not like I was about to lose my mind because of it. So I couldn't feel my arm at all, for the better. And then a couple days later, I was still coming out of the grogginess of, anesthesia and the high doses of medication that you're on to manage pain. And, I had a nerve pain killer, I had a regular painkiller, and then I also had a muscle relaxer. And that was one thing that I was really surprised about, that I had a lot of pain from, was not only the nerve pain, but because my tears were so low in my hand, they were in, which if you've looked this up, they were in zones 6 and 7, which are like the lower zones. Your hand split into so many zones, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so they were in the lower zones where the hairs were. And because of that, because they were so closely connected to my muscles, post-op, my muscle spasms were really, really, really bad. And I ended up taking muscle relaxers much more than I expected to. That was not something I had ever had to take for any reason, even through the other surgeries I've been through. I'd never needed to take muscle relaxers, but this really required me to have them. And I'm so thankful that I did. And obviously, your doctor can decide whether or not you need those, but I really did need them. I had constant muscle spasms. If I, just barely touched the back of my arm, a couple weeks post-op, it would shoot a spasm down that large muscle that's connected to the 3 middle fingers. And so that was pretty rough. And it took a lot of I feel like I'm a pretty strong person mentally, physically, and just my pain level is very high. The fact that I had torn tendons for 2 full weeks and was able to get through that without any kind of painkiller, I think that says a lot. So that's, anyways. So that covers the cast that I wore. Like I said, this was my nighttime cast. I wore it, underneath. It kept my hand at a 30-degree angle. And it's just basically to prevent you overextending these tendons, because, if you're to do that too soon post-op and your tendons aren't strong enough, they can potentially re-rupture. God forbid, that would be the worst case scenario. But it is important, for you to listen to your doctor's and therapist instructions. So, I had this on at night, every night, and then I had the other cast on during the day, which is so silly and crazy, but, it allows you to build the strength in these fingers by pulling on those rubber bands and the little loops that your fingers are in. Now, because my situation is so unusual and I had so much scar tissue, I have not gained full mobility in my hand, even 10 weeks, 11 weeks post-op with all the physical therapy, which was twice a week. It was pretty intensive. I saw multiple therapists. As you can see, this is as far apart as I can stretch my 3 middle fingers. I'm consciously trying to spread them out. So like you can kind of see the difference. Like my thumb and pinkies are, you know, like it's kind of crazy, but I can't physically, and like I look like a chicken. Like this is so dumb. But because that tear, you know, went to that muscle with the 3 connects to the 3, that's really been a problem, and the scar tissue around it has really prevented me from being able to fully be mobile again. I expected to lose some mobility. I didn't expect to lose this much mobility, which is why at my last follow-up with my doctor, they actually started talking about a second procedure to go in and clear scar tissue for the second time, and then basically would put me immediately into physical therapy like the next day. So there's no time off, that your body has to like build up scar tissue again. Like you have to be on top of it, and your body has to, you know, basically start moving immediately. So as you can see, I can move my wrist this much, which is a really big deal. I could not bend my wrist forward at all for a very, very long time. So for a long time, it was like, this is as far as it would go, is like straight as a board. And I'm like, this is dumb. Now I can get it to about there. It is tight on top. There's pressure, obviously, as you would expect, but I'm really glad that I've come this far. It's taken a lot of patience. And then I can lift my fingers that far, but I can grab things now. As you can see, my pointer finger kind of sticks out awkwardly. So one of my last goals in physical therapy was to be able to make a fist, and I can, you know, mostly do it with my fingers over here. It's that pointer finger that I really have a hard time getting down. So, you know, you can see I'm like actively trying to pull that down, and it's kind of just tight, basically, because of, you know, that being right there. So basically I would say that at this point my like mobility and recovery is probably like a 7 out of 10. I'm optimistic. Other people might say it's less than that. My surgeon might say it's less than that, but I feel really good. I'm just continuing to believe that it's gonna gain full mobility again, that it's gonna come back to life, and I'm gonna be able to use my 3 fingers with full capacity again and not look like a chicken hand because it looks dumb. So that's where I'm at. That's my journey. I hope that this gave you some information that maybe you didn't have before, maybe you couldn't find before, because like I said, I felt really like lonely and just so sad and confused because I couldn't find any information about this type of injury online. One thing I didn't talk about was being active again. So my surgeon was really adamant, because I have such an unusual situation, about me not using my fingers at all until he cleared me. So that included being able to do my hair, that included being able to do anything, you know, that's like small or detailed or like anything. He said none. And so basically I cut all my hair off because, one, I was mad that I couldn't put it in a ponytail. You try putting your hair in a ponytail with one hand. Good luck. You won't let it happen. But I cut all my hair off because I was so frustrated. I was like, can't do anything with one hand. But I finally got cleared to be able to use my hand again, so I can like lift small things. I can pull like a refrigerator door open. I can like shut my door in my car. But my pain stopped in my hand whenever I started working out again, whenever I started running. Now, I feel like this is probably unusual, not common, but I was okay with it because I was like, yo, I don't have to take Tylenol anymore, painkiller. Like, why wouldn't I want to run right now? Like, even if I'm still in the recovery process. Now, I did get cleared by my doctor. You have to be cleared by your doctor to be able to do anything, obviously physically aggressive or extensive, or anything that could potentially impact the healing process of the extensor tendon repair. So please listen to your doctor, listen to your therapist, do what you have to do, and you'll get there. But I just thought it was really interesting that I stopped having pain, nerve pain. I stopped having muscle spasms whenever I started running again. And ironically, I had a friend who actually broke this little last part of his finger the week after my surgery, and he had to have reparative surgery, and he also tore the flexor tendon in his ring finger. So it was just one tendon, but I've heard that these flexor tendon repairs are harder. I could be wrong. I've heard that the tendons underneath, which are called your flexor tendons are harder to recover from, and that the extensor tendons on top are easier. So like I said, I stopped having pain whenever I started running, and my friend who had the flexor tendon repair on just one of his fingers is still having pain, even though he had surgery a week after me. So I've been like pain-free for almost 5 weeks. He is still having pain like 12 weeks, 11 weeks post-op or whatever it is. So I just found that interesting. It may not be the case for you. It may be the case for you. Don't do anything you're not supposed to do. Listen to your doctor. Like I said, I'm not a medical advisor. I don't have any medical training. This is simply my experience. And I hope that it helped you out. And if you're alone and frustrated and sad and discouraged, please know that you are not alone, and that it's going to be okay, even if it doesn't feel like it or seem like it right now. So I hope this helped.